If you've walked into a pharmacy or scrolled through social media lately, you've probably noticed something. Supplements are everywhere. Pills, powders, gummies, capsules, all promising the same thing: slow down aging, live longer, feel younger, stay healthier for decades to come. And honestly, who wouldn't want that? The idea of taking a simple daily supplement that could add years to your life or life to your years is incredibly appealing. But here's the problem. With thousands of products flooding the market, each one louder and more confident than the last, how do you actually know which ones work? How do you separate real science from clever marketing? That's exactly what we're going to break down today. We spoke with actual longevity experts, doctors who specialize in evidence-based approaches to aging, and asked them directly, which supplements are genuinely worth considering if you care about living a longer, healthier life? And which ones are simply riding a wave of hype with very little science to back them up? The answers might surprise you, because some of the most talked about, trendy supplements right now don't have nearly as much evidence behind them as you'd think, while some of the more boring, unglamorous options actually have solid research support. Before we get into the list, I want you to think about your own bathroom cabinet or kitchen counter for a second. How many bottles are sitting there right now? A multivitamin, maybe some fish oil, perhaps something with a name you can barely pronounce that you bought because a friend or an influencer swore by it. Most of us have accumulated a small collection of supplements over the years, often without really questioning whether they're doing anything at all. And that's completely understandable. The supplement industry spends billions of dollars every year on marketing, and it's designed to make you feel like you're falling behind if you're not taking the latest trending ingredient. But feeling like something works and actually having evidence that it works are two very different things. That's the gap we're going to close today. So let's get into it. Let's start with the supplements that experts say may genuinely support longevity. Now, before we dive in, it's important to understand something. No supplement is a magic bullet. Experts agree that the benefits of any supplement really depend on your individual body, your diet, your existing deficiencies, and your overall lifestyle. There's no one-size-fits-all answer here. But with that said, there are a handful of supplements that keep showing up in the research with promising, consistent results. The first one on this list is vitamin D. This one might sound almost too simple, too basic to be exciting. No flashy branding, no viral TikTok trend behind it. Just plain old vitamin D. But here's why experts keep coming back to it. Some studies suggest that taking around 2,000 international units of vitamin D daily can actually slow down the rate at which your cells age. Think about that for a second. This isn't about looking younger on the outside. This is about what's happening at the cellular level, the actual biological clock inside your body. And it gets more interesting. Vitamin D deficiency has been linked to a higher risk of some pretty serious age-related conditions. We're talking about Alzheimer's disease, cognitive decline, Parkinson's disease, and even certain cancers. That's a heavy list. Dr. Hilary Lin, a Stanford-trained physician who focuses specifically on longevity, explained that vitamin D is one of the more well-supported supplements out there, but with an important caveat. It's most helpful if you're actually deficient in it. And here's a statistic that might shock you. Roughly 40% of Americans are believed to be deficient in vitamin D. That's nearly half the population walking around without enough of this crucial nutrient. Now, to be fair, this is still an evolving area of research, and scientists are continuing to study exactly how much of a role vitamin D plays in long-term healthy aging. But if you're someone who spends most of your time indoors, lives somewhere with limited sunlight, or simply hasn't had your levels checked recently, this might be worth discussing with your doctor. Next up, we have protein supplements. Now, this one is especially important as we get older, and here's why. As we age, our bodies naturally become more prone to muscle loss. This isn't just about looking less toned or feeling a bit weaker. Muscle loss in older adults is directly connected to reduced physical function, higher risk of hospitalization, and ultimately, a loss of independence. Think about what that actually means in real life. It could mean struggling to get up from a chair, having trouble carrying groceries, or facing a higher risk of falls and fractures. This is serious stuff. Research shows that combining protein supplementation with an active lifestyle can genuinely help older adults build and maintain muscle mass. And it's not just about supplements either. Studies have found that simply adding more protein to your meals, especially plant-based protein, is linked to a greater likelihood of healthy aging overall. According to Dr. Lin, one of the biggest issues she sees is that many people are consuming far less protein than their bodies actually need to build or even maintain muscle mass. And she made a really important point about something called sarcopenia, which is the medical term for age-related muscle loss. She described it as slow, silent, and something that actually starts much earlier than most people realize. It's not something that suddenly happens at 70. The groundwork is being laid for years before you notice it. So if you've been neglecting your protein intake, thinking muscle loss is a problem for later in life, this might be a wake-up call to start paying attention now. Moving on, let's talk about omega-3s. You've probably heard of these before, often associated with fish oil, salmon, and heart health. But when it comes to longevity specifically, the evidence, while still somewhat limited, is genuinely promising. Some clinical trials suggest that omega-3s may slow biological aging, meaning the actual age of your cells, by up to 4 months. And that effect seems to be even stronger when omega-3s are combined with vitamin D and regular exercise. So there's this interesting synergy happening between multiple healthy habits working together. Dr. Lin mentioned that omega-3s are actually one of her most frequent recommendations to patients, largely because of their anti-inflammatory properties and the support they provide for cardiovascular health. And she pointed out something many people don't realize, that a large number of people simply aren't getting enough omega-3s from their diet alone. If you're not regularly eating fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, or sardines, there's a good chance you're falling short. That said, it's worth mentioning that not all research paints the same rosy picture. Some studies have found that while fish oil does offer benefits for healthy aging in general, it doesn't necessarily slow the aging process itself or provide direct longevity benefits. So the science here is promising but still developing, and it's a good example of why nuance matters when we talk about supplements. Now let's talk about magnesium, another one of those unglamorous but genuinely important nutrients. Magnesium deficiency becomes increasingly common as we age, and when your body doesn't have enough of it, it can lead to increased inflammation and a rise in free radicals. Both of these have been closely associated with age-related diseases and the broader aging process itself. Inflammation, in particular, is something you'll hear come up again and again in longevity research. Chronic, low-grade inflammation is often described as one of the underlying drivers of many age-related conditions. Taking magnesium supplements to help maintain optimal magnesium levels in the body can genuinely support healthy aging. Interestingly, animal studies have found that magnesium supplementation can actually improve longevity, although this specific effect hasn't yet been firmly established in humans. Still, Dr. Lin noted that she personally recommends supplements like magnesium to many of her patients, and her reasoning is pretty compelling. She looks for supplements that have plausible biological mechanisms, meaningful data from human studies, and importantly, a low-risk profile. Magnesium checks all 3 of those boxes for her, which is why it remains one of her go-to recommendations. So that covers the supplements that experts genuinely believe are worth considering: vitamin D, protein, omega-3s, and magnesium. Notice something about this list? None of these are exotic. None of them come with wild marketing claims or celebrity endorsements. They're all fairly accessible, well-studied, and grounded in decades of nutritional science. Now, let's shift gears and talk about the supplements that might be overhyped. This is where things get really interesting, because some of these are incredibly popular right now, all over social media, all over wellness influencer content, and yet the science behind them tells a very different story. This next section comes from insights shared by Dr. Praveen Date, a primary care physician at Kaiser Permanente in Southern California, who also practices at Alive Health. Now, to be clear, these supplements aren't necessarily useless or dangerous. They have interesting biological mechanisms that make them theoretically promising for longevity and healthy aging. But when you actually look at the evidence supporting their effectiveness in humans, it's surprisingly thin. Let's start with one of the biggest trends in the longevity world right now: NMN and NAD plus boosters. If you've been anywhere near longevity content online, you've almost certainly heard these terms thrown around. NAD+, which stands for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, plays a crucial role in the body. Studies suggest it helps produce energy at the cellular level, reduces oxidative stress, and helps prevent damage to your DNA. Purpose. Dr. Lin put it really honestly when she said that human trials for these supplements are small and short in duration. Her exact take was that she's not saying these supplements don't work, but rather that we simply don't know yet, and that's a really important distinction. This isn't necessarily a case of a supplement being proven ineffective. It's more a case of the science not having caught up with the hype yet. If you're currently taking NMN or NR or considering it, just know that you're essentially participating in an experiment where the long-term human data isn't fully there yet. There's also another layer to this conversation that doesn't get talked about enough, which is regulatory uncertainty. NMN in particular has gone through some confusing shifts in how it's classified, with debates over whether it should even be sold as a dietary supplement at all. That kind of regulatory back and forth is often a sign that the science and the policy haven't caught up with the popularity of a product. So beyond just the question of whether it works, there's also a question of how consistent and reliable the products on the market even are. 2 bottles from 2 different brands claiming to contain the same dose of NMN might behave very differently once they're actually inside your body, simply because purity and manufacturing standards vary so much across the industry right now. Next on the overhyped list is Resveratrol. This compound is found naturally in grapes, red wine, and blueberries, and it's been marketed for years as this incredible anti-aging miracle ingredient. It's actually one of the reasons behind all that buzz you might remember about red wine being good for your heart and longevity. Some studies have shown that resveratrol has anti-aging effects, can prolong health span, and may help prevent certain age-related diseases. Some research has even suggested it could offer protection against the harmful effects of ultraviolet radiation, the kind that accelerates skin aging and contributes to wrinkles. Sounds amazing so far, right? But here's where we need to pump the brakes. The vast majority of these promising studies were conducted in cells in a lab setting or in animals like mice. There simply isn't enough research examining whether resveratrol actually extends health span in humans specifically. And this is where Dr. Lin's comment becomes particularly memorable. She described resveratrol as, and this is a fairly blunt assessment, thoroughly disappointing in human trials, especially when you consider just how extraordinary the results have been in mouse studies. That's a pretty telling gap. It's a perfect example of something that works incredibly well in a petri dish or in a mouse cage, but when you bring it into actual human biology, the magic just doesn't translate the same way. This happens more often in supplement research than people realize, and it's exactly why animal studies alone should never be the basis for taking something regularly. There's also a practical issue with resveratrol that rarely gets mentioned. Even in the studies that did show some benefit, the doses used were often far higher than what you'd realistically get from a standard supplement, sometimes even higher than what you could reasonably get from drinking wine or eating grapes. So even people who take resveratrol supplements regularly may not actually be getting anywhere near the amount that showed promising results in research settings. This is a pattern you'll notice across a lot of trendy supplements. The exciting headline doesn't always match the fine print of the actual study design. Moving on to our third overhyped supplement, Berberine. This one has exploded in popularity recently, sometimes even being nicknamed nature's Ozempic online because of its effects on blood sugar. Berberine has been reported to improve overall health by reducing inflammation and improving both blood sugar and blood pressure levels. Those are genuinely valuable effects if they hold up. Animal studies have suggested that berberine can significantly extend healthy lifespan. But once again, we run into the same issue. There isn't enough solid evidence to confirm that this same lifespan extending effect actually happens in humans. Dr. Date described berberine as being in a bit of a gray zone. According to him, it does appear to have some metabolic benefits, meaning it may help with things like blood sugar regulation, but it's still not something he broadly recommends to his patients across the board. Dr. Lin offered a slightly more nuanced perspective. She acknowledged that berberine actually has fairly robust metabolic evidence supporting its use. However, she raised a really practical concern, which is that berberine has poor bioavailability, meaning your body doesn't absorb and use it very efficiently. On top of that, the quality of over-the-counter berberine products can vary wildly, which may further limit how effective it actually is in real-world use. So even if the science on berberine's metabolic benefits continues to improve, the practical reality of taking a random bottle off a shelf might not deliver the results you're hoping for. It's also worth noting that berberine can interact with certain medications, particularly those related to blood sugar and blood pressure, since it affects those same pathways. This is a good reminder that even supplements considered relatively low risk can still carry real interactions, especially if you're already managing a health condition. Anyone considering berberine, especially if they're on other medications, really should be having that conversation with a doctor first rather than just adding it to their routine, because a video online made it sound impressive. And finally, let's talk about ashwagandha. This one has become incredibly trendy, especially in the stress and anxiety wellness space. Ashwagandha has deep roots in Ayurvedic medicine, and animal studies have reported that it can extend health span and promote healthy aging. However, when we look specifically at human evidence for longevity, there really isn't anything suggesting that ashwagandha actually promotes longer life or slows aging in people. Dr. Lin offered what might be the most balanced take on this entire list. She described ashwagandha as the most nuanced of all the longevity supplements we've discussed. Her reasoning is that there is some legitimate short-term data supporting its use for managing cortisol levels and stress. That part isn't necessarily overhyped. But when it comes to long-term safety data across diverse populations, that evidence is still quite thin. So essentially, ashwagandha might genuinely help you feel less stressed in the short term, but claiming it as a longevity supplement, something that will help you live longer, simply isn't backed by solid human research at this point. This actually brings up a really important point that applies to more than just ashwagandha. A supplement can be genuinely useful for one thing, like managing stress or improving sleep quality, without necessarily being useful for an entirely different goal, like extending lifespan. Somewhere along the way, marketing has blurred these lines, taking a supplement with modest evidence for one specific benefit and stretching that into much bigger claims about aging and longevity. It's worth being skeptical anytime a single ingredient is marketed as a solution for a huge range of unrelated problems all at once. Real biology tends to be more specific than that. So let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture here. On one side, we have vitamin D, protein, omega-3s, and magnesium. These are the supplements that keep showing consistent, meaningful results in human studies, and they come with relatively low risk. They're not flashy, they're not the subject of viral videos promising overnight transformation, but the research quietly supports them. On the other side, we have NMN and NAD plus boosters, Resveratrol, Berberine, and Ashwagandha. These are supplements with genuinely interesting biological mechanisms and exciting results in labs and animal studies, but when it comes to actual proof in humans, especially for longevity specifically, the evidence just isn't there yet. Does this mean you should never take any of these overhyped supplements? Not necessarily. Science evolves, and what we know today might look very different in 5 or 10 years. Some of these supplements might eventually be backed by strong human trials. But it's important to go in with realistic expectations, understanding that you might be paying a premium for something whose benefits, at least for longevity purposes, are still largely theoretical. What really stands out from talking to these experts is how much they emphasize looking at the full picture. It's not just about grabbing whatever supplement is trending this month. It's about understanding your own body, getting your levels checked when possible, especially for things like vitamin D and magnesium, evaluating your diet to see where you might be falling short on protein or omega-3s, and being honest with yourself about which supplements are backed by real human evidence versus which ones are riding a wave of promising animal data and clever marketing. It's also worth remembering that supplements, even the well-supported ones, are meant to fill gaps, not replace a solid foundation. Vitamin D matters most if you're actually deficient. Protein supplements matter most if your diet isn't already providing what your muscles need. Omega-3s matter most if you're not regularly eating fatty fish. Magnesium matters most if your levels are genuinely low. None of these are meant to be taken blindly just because they're on a list of things that are supposedly good for you. The smartest approach is always going to be a personalized one, built around your actual blood work, your actual diet, and your actual lifestyle, rather than a generic list that treats everyone the same way. What works well for a sedentary 70-year-old with a diagnosed deficiency is not necessarily what a healthy, active 35-year-old actually needs. It's also worth mentioning cost, because this rarely comes up in these conversations. Many of the overhyped supplements we talked about today, particularly NMN and NAD plus boosters, tend to be significantly more expensive than basics like vitamin D or magnesium. So you could easily end up spending far more money on a supplement with uncertain human evidence than you would on the ones that are actually well-studied and inexpensive. From a purely practical standpoint, that's worth factoring into your decision. Sometimes the most cost-effective choice and the most evidence-based choice turn out to be exactly the same thing. At the end of the day, longevity isn't about finding one magic pill. It never has been. It's about consistent habits, quality sleep, regular movement, a nutrient-dense diet, managing stress, and yes, filling in specific gaps with supplements when the evidence actually supports it. If there's one takeaway from everything we've covered today, it's this. Before you spend your money on the next trendy supplement promising to add years to your life, take a moment to ask what the actual human research says, not just the marketing, not just the mouse studies, and not just the influencer testimonials. Talk to your doctor, get relevant blood work done if you can, and make informed decisions based on your own individual needs rather than chasing the latest wellness trend. Thank you for watching, and if you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more evidence-based content on health, longevity, and separating real science from hype.